So my father was uh, an audiophile. He had the room that was just there for the stereo equipment. I was allowed in the room, but I knew that I was never allowed to touch any of the components, any of the equipment. I couldn't touch the records, nothing. I had my own record collection because my dad was always upgrading stuff. He passed stuff on to me, and he got me stuff too. So I had my own setup going on, and I was fine. I was allowed in his music room, but I wasn't allowed to touch his gear because he always had the latest and greatest. I remember names like Marantz, Macintosh, Altec Lansing, uh, Yamaha, I believe. I know it was always high end stuff. So I had my own setup going on, and I just loved music, and records were the one thing. Well, records and books. My parents always said you can have all the records and books you want. Toys and stuff, not so much. But records and books, sure, it's all yours. So I had a lot of music. In 1980, I was 10 years old. That's when I put my hands on the Radio Shack catalog for the first time. And let me tell you something. that was I forgot all about my superhero comic books and all that garbage as soon as I saw the Radio Shack catalog. That stimulated my imagination like nothing ever else had before. So, of course, I got into the little electronic projects and so forth. I believe one of my first projects was the FM radio station. Right? They had this cute little kit that allowed you to solderlessly connect different circuits and switches and allow you to experiment and figure out basic circuitry. So my first project was the FM radio station. The damn thing transmitted maybe, I don't know, half a mile, whatever. And it was cool. I enjoyed, I set aside a time and I actually played music and transmitted on this FM radio station because in my little 10-year-old mind, I thought somebody might be driving by and pick it up like that was ever going to happen. But it was just fun. And it was cool and everything. But where I actually became a DJ was in junior high because I was a b-boy. This was a birth of hip-hop culture. And yes, I was... Yep, when I was a little kid, I was back spinning and popping and locking and into the whole hip-hop culture thing, and it was fun. And, for there to be a crew of hip-hop guys hanging around, there's always a couple guys with the radios. Right, and the guy with the biggest radio is usually in charge of playing the music for the b-boys to battle to, right? So, I was never one of those guys in the beginning. I had my boombox, everybody did, but I was more interested in being a b-boy in the beginning. Well, I found myself complaining about the music a lot because whoever's in charge of the music, back then we were on cassette tapes. So, you play the song, either you set up a tape ahead of time or, you have to specially record the tape ahead of time, a certain flow of songs or whatever, but that's not really how that worked. The music we listened to was changing, so guys would have to jump around and switch cassettes and hold up a minute, I gotta rewind or I gotta fast forward to find that song and all of that nonsense. So at the time, I had one of the first personal computers was the Radio Shack TRS-80 personal computer. Back then, we actually saved our programs on cassette tape. And these cassette tapes, which were sold specifically for this purpose, were only about 10 minutes long because it only took a few seconds of tape to hold a program, or, a few seconds to several seconds, depending on how long the program was that you just wrote. Well, I discovered, I had a huge collection of them. I kind of inadvertently set myself up with the first cassette singles. Because I figured, well, I've got a whole bunch of these tapes. I'm not using as many as I thought I would. So what I would do is I would just record. I had a dual cassette deck set up, I would just record 1 or 2 songs per tape. And I had an old Army surplus rifle bandolier, cloth bandolier in each. It had like, I don't know, 8 or 10 pockets across it, and each pocket held 2 cassette tapes. This was crazy. So I would have this collection of cassette tapes, and I had, when it was my turn, to do the boombox thing, I was very quick at switching songs because of these singles that I had. So that kind of got me started. And after that, I kind of became the guy for the music after that, because I was the only person that went to all this trouble with all these cassette tapes and was prepared to sit there and switch tapes to make it sound cool. So that was me. I was no longer a b-boy. I was now a DJ, whether I knew it or not. So I'd switch the tapes really fast. Everybody got to hear what they wanted. Nobody had to wait for me to rewind anything. That was great and everything. But I still really wanted to kind of... I knew what DJs were doing, in New York at the time. I was aware. Now, of course, I didn't have a pair of turntables to work with, and I couldn't have carried them around anyway. But what I did have was a pair of basic cassette players. And in the process of messing around with one of my first boomboxes, which had since been broken, the cassette deck stopped working, so it was just sitting in the corner, and I had a new one, for Christmas the next year or whatever. In the process, of course, of me taking apart and messing with the old broken one, I figured out how to run a line level input directly into that radio. Well, not through the radio, through the cassette mechanism. I isolated the signal wires, and I soldered in a little RCA lead, which allowed me to plug a line level directly into this boombox. So what I did is I went to my trusty Radio Shack electronic parts catalog. I found all the pots that I needed, and I built my first mixer. It was extremely basic. It had 2 knobs. That was it. I mean, there was nothing else. There was just 2 knobs. It was 2. All I did was patch my 2 basic flat cassette players. So I had 2 of those linked into my homemade mixer, which are just 2 volume knobs, really. And that went into my boombox, my formerly broken boombox, which was now just an amplifier. So I inadvertently built my first DJ system when I was like 11, 12 years old, somewhere in there. I didn't think it was that big of a deal at the time. But when I brought it to school the first time, and the first b-boy, because b-boy battles happened all the time. The first time I broke out that set with my 2 tape decks, which was wonderful, because now I didn't have to, there was no break whatsoever between the songs. Because if you know anything about b-boys or ever seen a b-boy battle, nothing kills the energy faster than breaks between songs. So my system of swapping cassette singles, that was great and everything, but there was still several seconds of dead air between songs, no matter how fast I could go. So with this new mixer, now all of a sudden I had no dead air. I could just float one over the other and stop and play and all of that. And everybody else, I remember, thought that this thing was a whole lot cooler than I did. But I guess because I'd been messing with it and building it for, messing around with it for so long, I wasn't even impressed with it anymore. But I really enjoyed being that guy. So I guess there's birth of a DJ. We're talking 12 years old. And I already figured out how much fun this was. I realized that choosing the right music for who's around, it's very cool. It puts you in charge of people's emotions. I was figuring that out at that age, because of course music was such a big part of hip-hop culture. So, the whole kind of, every time these guys got together and we had a b-boy battle, it was all I was the one that set the mood. You know what I mean? I knew when to hype it up and when to slow it down, and more importantly, no breaks, because these battles would go on for they'd go on for several minutes. You know, we'd be at it. So that was it. That was Birth of the DJ right there. 12 years. Wow. Again, it's been a long time since I've even remembered or thought to think back to these days. But right after that, of course, the first time my family had some huge outdoor gathering, I had to set up. And that was one time my father helped me out with this. You know, he helped me get, again, I'm 12, 13 years old, so he ran me out power to where I was at, helped me carry out a pair of larger speakers, and it was pretty cool. I sat there using my system, playing music for a few hours, and it was actually quite a bit of fun. And because I was at home, I got to bring out my turntable and play some records too. So that was very cool. And I remember thinking, even at that age, I realized, wow, I'm affecting people's moods. People are responding. I'd look around and people are like shuffling around and dancing and bopping their heads and whatever. And I'm like, I did that. So, yeah, there you go. Birth of the DJ, 12 years old. That, of course, landed me right into the high school phase. And really the only thing there was to high school is that I convinced two people on the administration that liked me that they would do better if I were to DJ our school dances instead of whoever it is they were going to hire, because I didn't want to get paid. I just wanted to do it, and I knew the school had a PA system. I've seen the stacks of speakers in the music department. I knew what they had around. They had some stuff. So I told them, you don't need to hire anyone, because back then they would bring in this, professional mobile DJ who I saw work a couple of years. And it was a very impressive setup, don't get me wrong. But they took a chance. And so I did 2 of my high school dances using their PA system, of course, but my cassette single system, which I had, really grown at that point. We're talking about the mid-'80s here. So I was away at school, so cassettes were really the only way to go for me. I couldn't carry turntables and records and all of that. But I had my twin cassette deck, and I had all my cassette single system going on. So at that point, I remember then I actually bought a real mixer, a Realistic. I'm sure everybody's going to remember it, but I was looking pretty professional at the time. So 2 high school dances. That was it, but, it was fun. College, I did a couple of dances there too, only I didn't get those gigs. I worked with the guy that played those gigs. Now, he was also the university's photography department head. Okay, so he taught all the advanced photography classes, and that was his whole department. And part of it was he had this side gig playing the college functions. But he let me work for him, which was cool, because I'd help him bring in the equipment, set everything up, plug stuff in, set up his records, and I got to watch him work. And this is when I got introduced, really, this is my first time that I got to get up close and personal with professional turntables. And he had this really cool system that he had custom built, where the bed that the turntables sat on were actually suspended by springs. So even if anybody bumped into the table, or, he didn't have as much of an issue as you would if you'd have just set him directly on, on a folding table. Very cool system. Loved working for the guy. He was cool to work with. He actually let me run the lights, which I thought was fun. I mean, back then, we're talking, again, mid-'80s. Late 80s at this point. Lights were still nothing special, but it was fun. to be in control of them for a little while. And at one point in the evening, after I was just like, hawking him, checking out how he was doing everything, at one point he let me switch over from one song to another. And that was pretty official. I knew I had to do that. You know what I mean? That was a nice feeling, because it was a really hot party. There were a lot of people there. It was, there was about 200 and something people in the room at the time. And that's the first time I got my hands on turntables in front of people, was in college. And that was a lot of fun. I knew I wanted to do that.